How coincidental you'd bring up energy. Energy costs are a significant issue for many businesses in the state of Maine. Would you favor the development of an energy corridor through the state of Maine, which would allow for cheaper energy from Canada to flow south, even if the Canadians continue to block the construction of a natural gas terminal off the coast of eastern Maine? And Steve Rowe.
Well, as I said before, energy is one of the real cost drivers holding job creation back in the state of Maine. We've got to have, I think, a three-phase strategy. Number one is conservation, conserve, weatherize our homes and our businesses. And we have a plan, and we have to move forward with that with deliberate speed, making sure that we reduce our use. Right now, 80% of our homes are heated by home heating oil, which is polluting, which comes from overseas. The electricity that we use, most of that comes from polluting power plants. We need to obviously move to renewables, to clean energy, but in the interim, we need cheaper electricity. And one way to get that is from Canada, from Hydro-Quebec. So yes, I do support having a corridor and importing electricity from Canada, not using Maine as a throughway to move electricity from Quebec to the rest of New England, but to have spurs in Maine so that we benefit. We put Maine people first. Right now, I have a friend who manages a semiconductor manufacturing facility in Maine, and there was a competition last year to see which plant would close. The corporate parent had a plant in Maine and in Texas. In Texas, the cost was 5 cents a kilowatt hour. In Maine, it was 13 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the difference. That's how non-competitive we are. So I would support that, bringing electricity from Canada. I also would support LNG. I think natural gas is cleaner. It has a more stable price. And it has a lower price. And so I certainly support using natural gas as an interim substitute for home heating oil, but eventually moving to wind, to solar, to tidal power, and biomass, renewables, Maine being energy independent.
Libby Mitchell.
I do support the energy corridor, and I'm surprised that we haven't mentioned him yet. It always comes up in every debate. There's a person from here who's quite famous. His name is Habib Dogger, who has led the way in putting Maine on the map in terms of renewable energy and the research that's going on at Orono, because it isn't just about using the corridor for Canadian hydropower. That's important too, but we're going to be producing so much renewables in the next 5 to 10 years. We're going to need a pipeline to ship it to our energy-hungry neighbors to the south, a renewable green energy pipeline. And also, we own the land that the pipeline will traverse. Maine can lease that asset. The corridors along our highways, we already own it, and that money can come back into the state of Maine to help reduce our dependence on foreign oil and help us to weatherize all our homes. But one important thing to note is that we don't want just a DC current going from northern Maine down to New York or Boston. We want to make sure that Maine people have the benefit of the pipeline as it carries electricity and energies to the south. So yes, I do support the corridor. I think it has great promise for bringing money into Maine and helping us sell our renewable energy, which we're going to be producing in abundance.
Pat McGowan.
I support it, but the first question that I will ask is, what is the benefit for Maine people? Maine people, Maine businesses, Maine families, Maine jobs. That's a key portion of this that has not yet been answered. DC current was mentioned. You need to convert it in a very expensive way at the beginning and then change it back to AC at the end of that line, which means, do we want spurs in between that will benefit with low-cost energy for paper mills, for small businesses, for our own public buildings, schools, and other entities, and our homes? That's a key question that we need to make sure is answered before we buy into this system. We have a proposal that we've been talking about, and it's about not making us totally energy independent, but making us energy self-reliant. And so when we look at weatherization and we look at the opportunity, on Earth Day, I had my own home, an 1835 Victorian, had an energy audit, and we'd had a lot of upgrades, but the fact is that we could save between 30 and 50% in that one home on our energy costs by doing a certain list of things and changing our systems. We send $5 billion a year outside of this state in energy costs. If we had 30 to 50% of that saved through weatherization, wind power, biomass, tidal power, offshore wind, we could make a huge difference, and we would have new money here in Maine for Maine people?
Rosa Scarcelli.
The question is whether or not I would support a corridor, and I would. But the question that I have is who's going to cut that deal, because we need to make sure Maine cuts a very good deal. I look at what we did with our liquor contract, and I wonder how that deal got cut. We need to make sure this is long-term and that we get a piece of the money that's moving through that every single day. So it's not a one-time payment. It has to be an ongoing, recurring payment, and that money needs to be directed to something meaningful, and I would direct it to a revolving loan fund that would fund weatherization for all Maine homes and businesses over the next 20 years, because without the capital, we can't weatherize our homes. We can talk about it, and it sounds nice, but if you don't have the money, you're not going to get it done. Most importantly, though, we need to recognize that we can't use the cheap power from Canada unless we look at possibly partially deregulating, and I don't know if people are ready for that yet, but when we regulated in the state of Maine, our costs went through the roof. And the question needs to be, how do we reduce energy costs for homes and businesses in Maine? Because that's keeping us from growing. And as a business owner, I know. I'm in 35 towns. I've got nearly 60 properties, and most of them are electric heat because they were built in the 70s through the early 90s, and that was the mode of construction at the time. So I can tell you exactly what it means to have high electricity costs, and it is very, very difficult to be competitive. So that has to be the focus. We need to cut a good deal, and I have experience cutting deals with Fortune 500 companies, and I know we can get a good deal for Maine, and we also need to look at our energy policy. We have one, but it needs to be revised, and we need to take a holistic approach, more like a 401k, and make sure we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket.